have been in our ecosystem forever, as some of you are, some of you haven't been. But Tyson, just to give a little context, and then he can give some more of his background prior to this. But a couple of years ago, he came across us when he was, actually, he just divulged this to me the other day. But kind of while he was in his buying courses, programs phase, right? Just learning digital marketing in kind of all capacities. As I think we all have experiences and stories about that, right? Everybody has a different little total number on what they've spent on their education and learning here. But Tyson came into our high ticket program, long story short, and within a number of weeks, we actually hired him to work internally, build out some systems, some tools. He helped coach clients. We actually replaced Adam in the knowledge gap analysis with Tyson because he was about the only one that could do it in a similar capacity in terms of overall effect it has on the client's business. And Tyson, that kind of goes back into a lot of what we're going to talk about today with reverse engineering different things. And as you mentioned to me the other day, I never really thought of it quite that way until you brought it up to me again. But you mentioned how kind of being obsessive is kind of the number one trait that leads to, for you personally, your success, but really a lot of people in all kinds of different sectors, industries, positions, on and on. So if you just start with giving us a little of your background, how you got to where you are, and just elaborate on what I just touched on, that'd be a great place to start, man.
For sure. First of all, I read your post that you posted in like prep for this, and I was like, you're too kind. Like, I think success depends on like how you define it. And I think for me, I found it really well just for like my own life, and how I'm set up and what kind of fits for my family and things. So by no means am I a billionaire, things like that. But I did find a lot of success. Like, I'll tell you this, of all the courses I bought, and I probably spent about 80 grand, like I was telling you, in trying to learn like all these high ticket courses and learning these things. And yours, I'm pretty sure, was the last one that I bought. So like, yeah, it was awesome. So how I kind of got into this. Is it cool if I just kind of tell like a bit of the story? I think they'll learn the pattern for this and it will tie in nicely. But
I would love you to.
Essentially, and keeping in mind, there's a difference between like learning marketing and like copying someone else's marketing or someone else's like course altogether and selling it as your own. And I think that's a no-no, versus like sales and learning what like the best are doing and actually doing that and to make your own sales. And so my history started back in door to door, actually. So I did door to door for 4 years. I went to school at BYU, Idaho, and in the summer times I would go down to Dallas and then Kansas City to knock door to door. And the biggest thing I learned from that whole experience was like my first 3 years, like an average accounts that you'd sell is about 200 accounts going door to door, selling pest control, nothing crazy. And then I found that someone had actually packaged together this like university of all the top reps pitches in the industry. So I paid $1,500 for this like university access, and literally I didn't use 95% of it. I just found the top guy that I know I wanted to find, and I hand wrote out his entire pitch. And then I also looked at what he said he was doing. So what he was also doing is he hired 3 trucks to follow him as he would go. Now he was the owner of the company, so I couldn't hire 3 trucks, but I could talk to the people I was doing business with and say, hey, I'll pay the lease on 1 truck and I'll pay the salary for the technician, and then no one can use that person. They're just going to follow me around all summer long. And so I went and then I did that my last year. My last year I sold 560 accounts. I like over doubled what I've been selling before, just from obsessively modeling who I knew was like number one, and which is pretty big. Now he like literally runs 1,500 accounts and he had 3 trucks. So if I had 1 truck follow me, I did 560. I figured I had 2 more, maybe I'd have got 1,500. But point being is right. So that's what I thought. So that was like my first. That's what wasn't my first exposure, but it was my first intentional time actually finding the best and modeling them, because I learned that from my very first time doing door to door, which was life insurance door to door. And when I'd come out to Dallas, my first half of that summer to learn how to do it, there was this kid named Luke Olson. He's like a director at Via now doing software sales. But he and I were, he recruited me to come out there, and he was the only one that was figuring things out. All these other kids were just out there trying to knock it. And even the managers, the owners were like, yeah, just go out there and knock the doors until you figure it out. And I was like, I'm not going to just knock doors until I like quote unquote figure this out. This is like way too complex. No one's done it before. Like, it's not really a thing unless like way back in the old days. So I decided to just follow Luke with a pen and a paper And this is before I realized or was like comfortable with just recording conversations. So I literally would just like listen to what he'd said over and over and over, and I would just hand write out what he was saying. People thought I was probably weird because they just see this like tall 6'6" kid just with a notepad writing everything this other kid is saying. But I just hand write it out, and then I'd get home and I'd make sure it all made sense, and then I would memorize it, and then I would go and I started doing that, and then I was selling like better than literally anyone else in the company aside from Luke. So that was my first like time stumbling across this idea of like, oh, just find what the one guy who's actually doing this is crushing it and doing it for sales, right? Find his script, write it down, memorize it or know it perfectly, and then go and implement it word for word what you're doing. So that was my first time stumbling across accident. It worked for me in door to door, and then after I did my door to door stint and decided I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, that's when I decided to take. I had all this money. I decided to take a year off and figure out this internet. I didn't know anything. If you would have asked me what copywriting was when I started this, and this would have been like maybe what was it, like 3 years ago when I met you guys, just under. And I thought copywriting was like some sort of like a patent or something, right? Like a copyright, like for music sheets or something. So I didn't really know. So I started from that, and I just was like, okay, well, I've got to figure out what this is. And that was a lot longer because there's so many paths and so many shiny things. And I didn't realize like how freaking good everyone is at hooks, right? And just all these different pathways. So I dived into so many different things. And so do you know Yash that was on the podcast last? Yash Ravi, and then I know most people might know them, and Brad.
Yeah, I think most people would.
Together, right? So they were just at my house. They came from San Diego, came and stayed over at my place in Utah here, and they saw my bookshelf and they're like, "Wow, like that is a digital marketer's bookshelf." Because my whole bottom half, I've got other stuff, and then the whole bottom half is just like things like breakthrough advertising through to, tested advertising methods to make it stick, to like just tons of books like that. Because I was just insane trying to figure out this whole. I just wanted to be good at it. I wanted to understand what it was. So I started with that route. I got into Billie Jean's course at first, and kind of that was my first introduction through that. And I hired my first coach, and
we both had that in common. We talked about the other day. The Billie Jean was my first thing too.
Yeah, right. I hired my first coach that was in a Facebook group that thought would do it. I got screwed by my first coach. Not his fault. He just didn't realize I wasn't sophisticated enough to like actually do what he was thinking he'd want me to do, and I didn't know any better either. So that was like my first experience, and then going in and learning like some of Steve Larson stuff over in ClickFunnels. And then from there, I was on the way down from an event when I called you, and I was like, all right, Ray, I've been watching your stuff. Let's just buy this right now. I bought it from a car as we're driving down. And that's where I got into your thing. The reason why I was looking for yours is because I knew you guys were the best at organic marketing that I was in my ecosystem aware of for Facebook groups. And so I was like, okay, I had in my journey partnered with a woman that I'd become a setter for. I started setting for her in her Facebook group. And then from there, I wanted to like do more than just being a setter or even just like any form of a closer. I wanted to like do the marketing of it myself. And so I was like, well, I talked her into basically letting me partner with her on an offer. But I knew one of our weaknesses was she was running just paid ads to a group. And I knew one of the weaknesses was we needed to figure out like organic to kind of mass that so people could get up to running the ads. That was their thinking at the time. Whether that's the best way or not, ask Yash. I don't know. So anyways, at this point, I'm out of the Facebook group scheme for like maybe a few, couple months or so.
That's all it takes. That's all it
right.
takes.
Literally with how fast things go,
Yeah.
So, and I never anyways, I don't profess to be like expert at that, but I am good at learning a system and then coaching it, or learning a system and implementing it, So anyways, that's how I'd come across your scenario. You guys opened up at the time, it was hybrid closer, which is probably what's a lot of your guys' sales lab stuff now.
Correct.
And that was really helpful because I did the same thing. After I went and like just found what the best were doing, like there two people that I know of who are like the best at high tech closing would be Jesse, you, and then like maybe a Cole Gordon in his own way, right? And so I went through and hand transcribed all your stuff, put it onto a Miro board for my own thinking, put it all there. And then I know my wife and I had been talking. We're like, okay, we've done this digital marketing thing. It's like kept us afloat and been learning how to do these things, and it's good. But I was putting in a lot of hours for myself just in my season of learning all these things. And she wanted more of me, and we had a kid, and we're having another wedding here in March. So we decided we wanted to move from frozen Idaho to Utah. So I started applying for some software jobs. And what's funny is that Luke Olson kid that years and years ago that I followed doing life insurance, he was the first person I reached out to and asked, okay, well, tell me about software sales. And he's like, well, you're going to look for an account executive position. I didn't know what that even meant at the time. I was like, okay, account executive is basically a closer for software. So I went and learned what that was. And then I went and applied to a bunch of jobs and I had someone accept me for an interview. And I kept getting turned down by interviews because they wouldn't let me role play. They were like, oh, you don't have enough software experience. And I was like, all right, let's just do a role play and let's see if I can do this. The first one that let me do role play was a company called Weave. They're big, public, they crush it. And met with the directors and they had me and they're like, yeah, let's just see an interview. And so I simply pulled up the mirror board of your hybrid closer framework that I had, pulled it up on my computer. They can't tell that I'm looking at my computer screen and reading right from it and following the framework. And that's what I did. I said, you'll be an insurance agent. I'll sell you some marketing. And they're like, cool. And by the end of that interview, they're like, yeah, you're hired. Like, yep, let's do this. Right. I just needed one role play to do it. And so they hired me and it was great, easy transition, got me down in here to this ecosystem software sales. And I did the same pattern. I went and I found, okay, I'm here at Weave. Here's all these reps that seem to be doing okay, but there's one who's going to be like the best one. So I got to find out who that is. So I simply just asked my peers, who's the top guy? Who's the one that everyone wants to be? His name was Preston. So I found Preston. I found they were using Gong at the time. And Gong is an awesome software. It can just record all your sales calls and your transcriptions. So I went and found that transcription word for word. I just took it right off of there. I put it onto a Google Doc, organized it so it was easy for me to read that transcription. And then I just started reading that as I was on sales calls. And people, I have two screens, so they can't tell when I'm like looking at a script or talking to them. As long as I know the script well enough, as I've read through it a few times, my tonality and voices, you could never tell that I was on a script. And so I just would read that over and over. Then I ended up being the number one selling rep in the entire outbound organization there for my first month out of ramp. You know, you have 3 months of ramp and then you start your first, you got to be hitting full quota. And I was like the number one selling rep for that month. And everyone, of course, was like, how did you do that? And so I would tell them, I was like, well, you just find what the top guy is doing, what the number one person is doing. You obsess over how they're saying it, what they're doing, what they word for word, what they say. And then you just put it on this Google sheet, you pull it up, and then you just read that like it's like literally like it's scripture. And you just follow that puppy all the way through and it will guide you through. And you might have to deviate here and there in a response to a question, but that's your framework as tight as it gets. And that's going to get you probably not to be number one, but it will get you to where you can function comfortably and you're not stressed about whether you're going to hit quota or not. And so I wouldn't say that I'm a great salesman, but I'm a great modeler, especially in sales. And so that to me has kind of been my continual story is like, if I want to get to the top 5%, like clockwork every time, it's not falling into, well, this trap where everyone after I'd hit number one in the company for that month there, that first month out of ramp, they all come to me and they're like, hey, like, how did you do that? And I'm like, here's how I do it. Here's the script, exactly what he's done. And they go, and then I even sent it to him over Slack. They all have a copy of it. How many do you think actually read it? It's the weirdest thing in the world, dude. None of them wanted to use it. For some reason, like they ask, how do you be successful? And then they just don't do so simple as reading it, right? And so it was interesting to see that because they had this belief or this, like, I don't know what you would call it. We'd call it a common belief or a false common belief, right? Of
misconception.
Right, a misconception of like, oh, I need to make the sales mine. And if I make it mine, then it'll work. But I think the other way around. I think you become the top selling scripts. Like let it own you, let that bless you, as you become more familiar with it. And as you change, then your results are going to change, right? So that was that experience there. And then I work for a company called Bacon now. And Bacon is kind of like Uber, but for hiring for temp workers, like temporary workers, like companies like I don't know if anyone's on the West Coast, there's lots of doTERRA has a huge one, or Marriott hotels, those people will post a shift for workers and then workers will come and work shift through the app just like Uber. And so I didn't really seek out this opportunity. If you ask me, it's a mind-blowing idea. I was like, oh, that's like so cool. But what's funny is I had a director of sales who asked a friend of his who happened to be Luke Olson, that kid I'd forever ago. Yeah, he says, who do you know? We have an outside sales team that goes to the warehouses, but who do you know can build an inside sales team structure? And the first person he said is like Tyson McIntyre. He's your guy. So here I get transferred over to, I got headhunted and came over here and I worked for like an easily 6-figure base salary and lots of commission, lots of up end and all sorts of stuff, which is fun. All because that, back in the day, I would follow Luke and just handwrite a thing and try to follow the script. So the difference between this opportunity now and those is there really isn't a number one inside sales rep. So now what do you do? And so I hope this adds some value to people listening too. But it's in this scenario, what I do is I find, okay, well, let's find what the top selling outbound rep was doing. What was she doing? So I went in a car ride with her and followed her around as we'd go to warehouses. And I took my phone, and I had a vest just like this one. And I'd put my phone in the pocket of the vest and record the whole time. And then I'd just get everything that she said. And then I got back here and I transcribed everything, copied and pasted it all into a Google Doc. And then that's how I would close my first, that's how I closed my very first deal, my very first call here. And that's how I continued to close all those deals just off of that script. And it gets me up to the 5% so fast. Like there's 21 reps and I was number 5. You know, the only ones that were ahead of me was like the regionals for the outside team. You know, so it's a very quick way, kind of a quick hack. If you'll follow it religiously, and just find word for word what they do in the sales call of that group and do that. But now it's like, okay, how do we adapt this? And now that's where I do what I've always done. I find what are the best ones doing. And so for software sales, it's LinkedIn. Like I've had to go on lots of LinkedIn, just follow all the top cold email, top setting, top closing, software sales reps, and then I just study their accounts religiously because they put such good value. If they have a program, I dropped $1,000 on a program from one of the top reps at Gong. He started his own program, and that helped me really fill in the gaps and pieces. So be willing to investigate in one's words, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully that's of value to people, but to learn what obsession looks like in the right ways, it's different than like, obsessing on the marketing side where Yash and I would, because this is straight copy and paste. Like in sales, you can take their words, you're not going to get in trouble for that and go, and that's how you close deals on a sales call versus like straight up stealing someone's ad, right? You don't want to do that. But that's kind of my journey with hopefully there's value out of that today of just like, that's what like obsession looks like when it comes to identifying what the top are doing and just taking those words in a sales setting for people that might be struggling with sales calls, rather than falling into the trap of, don't get too scripted. It's like, until you actually are closing something, let it get scripted. And then once you close something for your first time and then your second time, then worry about, being natural. Again, this isn't the way to become number one. This is the way to, as fast as you can, get up to where you're making a living. And doing that.
I mean, you've been number one or close to number one in a couple of places. And you said a lot of good stuff in there that we can go back and touch on. But I think the first thing is, once you became number one in that last offer or that last company you're working for, and then people start asking you, and it's funny, you give them the blueprint that was success for you, and then they just don't do it, right? Like when you talk about the obsessive thing, that correlates highly to activity and putting hours in work, right? Whether you were doing it on a notepad, whether you were recording it and then transcribing it and listening at home and taking out the key takeaways. I just think that we just discussed a little the other day when you and I spoke. I just think that 95% of the population won't or doesn't do that, right? And that's, part of where you're getting ahead is just by doing something that's not overly complicated, but that 95% of people aren't going to do, right?
Yeah, I would say like there's a seasons in life, right? And like parts of your season are to, if you're not producing for your life, you need to go through the all-nighters. You need to go through the points in time. Like there's times where Yash and I, for example, we would go and we would spend, now mind you, he was doing all-nighters all the time when he was in India, but like I'm pulling all-nighters with him as we would go through. I would sign up and subscribe to other top performing Facebook groups, like their email lists, right? And I would have data and we would go through and reverse engineer every single email to figure out exactly what they were doing in those patterns. And I pulled 2 all-nighters doing that just to get how Facebook groups would work that way, just off of an email thing, right? I know Yash and Brad have done tons of work with like 44 groups where they've just grown, but that came from like their season of the grind, and now they're kind of at a point where they're like, all right, maybe we should have a little bit more balanced life, right? Good. That's important to have that too. But you don't get to like take the break off until you're like getting food on the table, until you're helping those you've made promises to already to provide for them. So that's it's seasons.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I've had my share of 6-hour days and all-nighters.
Right.
Just
exactly.
pulling research on competitors, reverse engineering, and then trying to craft some copy that I thought would catch my market, stand out, what have you. You mentioned something else really cool there, and self-admittedly, you say you're not a great salesman, yet everywhere you're going, you're in the top 5%. Overall is a great lesson. Somebody self-admitted, not, saying I'm not a great salesman, but still getting to the top 5% within the companies that you're going to, and this now being headhunted and brought over there just because of what you've done and you talked about in the marketplace. Hey, who can build this out if I don't have this? Tyson can, right? And then like your first name that comes to somebody's head, that also said a lot. Really cool. So I start off by saying I was too kind. Maybe, right? That's certainly subjective. I think you are one of the brightest people that I have had the chance to work with or interact with, and I've talked to you a little about this on Monday. I like engaging with you because I learned something new, and I feel like I'm leveling up. I like to be in a room where people are as smarter than me. And as I said the other day, unfortunately, it doesn't happen as much as I would like anymore. And it's not tooting my own horn. That just means I'm dealing with my audience.
You know the wiser. The
old for sure. The wise is debatable.
That's cool.
But yeah, and then and you led off with saying, when talking about me being too kind, saying, success is different for everybody, right? I'm not a billionaire, totally, and I didn't tout you as a billionaire, but I fully agree. Success is different for everybody. But from where you're at a couple years ago to the decent 6-figure salary plus the incentives and commissions you're earning, I mean, in a correlation, you're out there.
And because digital marketing space is so relevant to other things. Like I learned, digital marketing. These businesses, like I live in Utah, where it's kind of like Silicon Slopes is what they call it. It's like a new version of the Silicon Valley, right, over in California. And so here, it's kind of interesting to see like everything we learned about direct response, I think, is undervalued in a lot of like tech businesses sometimes. And so it's kind of cool to just see and recognize principles related when we see our marketing, and to be able to give some help or suggestions on those pieces specifically, or just to know why something doesn't work. It's like, well, the email doesn't work. It's like literally takes me 4 minutes to read it. Like, just things like that, or it's because the hook isn't there, or because you're not addressing their skepticism. Soon after, you can't make a claim and then not address it, right? So it's really fun to go into the digital marketing gauntlet, learn, the PDOCS of how we think as humans, right? And how we write as humans, and then get the AI involved later on. But it's cool to know that, and I'm really grateful for that. And then, to apply that to your sales calls, to your, there's just so many applicable things to it. We ran an offer, like this is the one that I'd partner with that lady.
Okay.
Where we went and we became part of the 2CCX, like the two, like for Russell Brunson's inner circle sort of program. I kind of learned some of how to do that, but I was using PDOCS to and modeling that in order to make that even work. Like they give you some frameworks, but there wasn't like, how do you pitch it? And so I remember going and watching specifically one of those top dogs over there in the ClickFunnels world, and I transcribed, like hand wrote her entire pitch on her last day. And you all will probably know who she is. And I hand wrote everything of how she said it and structured all of that, and then pulled that on a Google Doc, so that on our last day of our 5-day challenge, right, when we put that one to me, we're closing like 25 grand in our first month and 25 grand the second month. Not crazy good numbers, but it's enough to make a living, right? It gets you automatically there from their sales pitch, right? So it's really fun just to realize like it's such an applicable thing over and over. Like anytime I want to make money, just like transcribe what the tops say on their pitch. It's also helped me structure the offer a little bit better too. But even though we're doing two different things, they're selling like events, and I'm not selling events. We're selling like kind of like this one. Look, my part that you're doing this group in for a networking group, and it's a different demographic, like a lot older demographic, and would help them grow their network and kind of help them in their businesses. But it was like a networking group that she would do. She made $500,000 doing it, like in just a couple of years. So pretty dang good. So she gets a lot of people wanting to learn how to do that. And so we're like, well, we're going to take a select few, because these older people, they really struggle with it, but it's integrated in all things. So it's like, if we could just help them get past that, then that's a big win for them. So it was kind of our honor, and we did really well with it. for a while, until her network runs out, and then we have to learn the pay dance game. And boss, right? So, but yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Just again, another example of that model. Like it really does work of finding how people are selling something on a sales call, and if you know they're selling a lot, and if you can get that transcribed, that's going to be a great thing to model. I know you and Jesse. I was listening to Jesse's top sales calls and transcribed all those, and that's how I made that hybrid and closer thing, right? And that's really how I was still use it like to this day, just like thinking through how to structure a certain call. Anytime I'm in an environment, I always compare that to what's being trained at the company, right? So, yeah, pretty helpful stuff.
No, totally. Another thing you mentioned just now is you're kind of when you were just talking about where you were, you're like, what you're learning in the digital marketing, it's applicable to other areas. I kind of learned that backwards, and then I made the connection because I had 20 years in kind of corporate America in all brick and mortar, real in-person visitation, right? Nothing online, nothing digital. And then when I kind of got into this space, and it took me from like 2017 to 2019, while still working my full-time job of reading books, taking courses, hiring a coach, before I started in I still remember the date. I've talked about it quite a bit. November 15th, 2019, when I left that corporate career and started working for myself. I started as a closer in a $20 million per year digital consultancy at the time. And it only took me a handful of months until I partnered up with Jay and we started to launch our own consultancy, which then morphed into PDOCS, Sales Labs, Audience Lab, everything we got going on now. But my kind of point here is when I really made the connection of all the similarities to what I do in the digital space as what I used to do in kind of the in-person, sales, it wasn't really much different. You know what I mean? There's just a different avenue of initial outreach. I'm not in front of the person, so there's a little different way to grab their attention, right? But after that, what I've learned is it still all comes down to relationships and how you treat people. It doesn't matter if you're doing it online, doesn't matter if you're doing it in person, and people can kind of sense those companies that their product goes above and beyond is phenomenal, but as well as the people, the faces of those companies that are actually engaging with the audience, and those things become very noticeable. But I just think it's really cool, kind of morphing like what worked in person sales and brick and mortar as opposed to the digital world. Once I really had a grasp of understanding, and then I just saw the correlations. I'm like, shit, this is what I used to do 10 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? Now I'm just doing it a little bit of a different fashion, but so many things related and correlated that it's so cool to kind of see it come full circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that if again, because the point of these live streams, I think from what you've told me too, is just like give them pieces of value, like they can like actionable. That's like the most actionable thing that's worked for me. Has been just modeling what works, getting to that top percentage, and like you said, there's things like if they can use PDOCS on so many different things that they have going on, and their entire pipeline essentially, it's just all there. It's just human psychology right all the way through. It's pretty helpful, but I don't think there's very many people that know it in such a simple and clear way as like I can put them on one hand. It'd be like you, Adam, and Jesse, right? It would be and your guys' sales lab and audience and an audience lab, like that's huge. It would be like Yash Ravi and Brad Newsom, like they do that. What they have going on with what they've grown for those 44 groups. If anyone has a chance to go check those things out, they should definitely go check that out if it makes sense for them, right? If you have a group, if you have revenue, they have something new coming out with like a done with you services coming out that they have kind of pushing. So go check that out. Like those are the guys that I would trust if I were to go back into digital marketing and dive into that a little bit more. If I don't already coach for them, like I like totally coaching with you guys a lot, and even Yash and those guys. It was fun.
That was fun.
And then like those are the two main things. And then I don't know, my last piece of advice. So Yash and Brad came over to our place here in Utah, and we all drove down to Moab. And Moab is like otherworldly. Like you'll get there, and I challenge you to try to tell me how that was created. It was pretty cool. And anyways, it was kind of fun because it was like I got to do a little bit of like a PDOCS experiment with them a little bit, just like to hook them. We took them to Arches National Park, and it was kind of cool just to like see the way these things were created, and really to them it was like, whoa, it's like huge. And then I was like, oh, just you wait though. I started building anticipation. Like tomorrow at Canyonlands, it's going to be something else. You like just remember how big this is, so that down the road you'll kind of see. And it was like literally just opening up a revelation for them over like the 2.5 days of showing them from where we were so close to March, and then to all of a sudden like the deeper we got into it, eventually we're looking at and people just have to Google pictures of Canyonlands National Park, but essentially we're now up on top of what they were once looking up at, and we're looking at everything, hundreds of miles, like 5 New York cities could have fit in what we were looking at, full of just massive canyons and arches and like 7 layers of the earth deep. Like it was so cool for them to see that, and they were floored. It was fun. But I feel like
nice
that's
area of the country.
It is. I feel like that's like the way that human persuasion is, though. Like you just kind of have to like start modeling something that's already working from people who have already done all the hard work right away, just to get up to the baseline to where you're like, okay, cool, now we're at Arches. Like we just got here. We just arrived, right? We now know the lingo. We know everything. And it really helps to just model what's already working really quick. Internalize it yourself by practicing it on some sales calls or practicing it in your communication in general. And then from there, it starts to just slowly get deeper and deeper, because now you start to see it everywhere. You start to see it in every single bloody ad that you see. You like Brad and Yash and I will watch ads on our Facebook just because we love to see, oh, that looks like that was a bit of an offer lead. I don't know if that really makes sense for the audience they're advertising to. Or, oh, that looks like is, a secret lead. Sneaky, you know what I mean? Like it gets so fun. You get PDOCSing everything. You're just like, oh, it's so cool. So yeah, I think it's just fun in general, like to be able to do this. So those are my 3 pieces of advice. Go check out Yash and Brad's. Go check out like freaking Raymond and Jesse know what they're talking about when it comes to sales. And then of course Adam's just this mastermind, nerd in the back.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, I still don't know.
It's just so incredible. Like
I still don't know if I know a smarter marketer than Adam, to be honest.
I know, dude. It's just baffling to me. He's awesome.
I mean, I'm biased because I'm his partner, but like I don't say that lightly either. If I thought somebody was better, I'd be happy to say it. I just haven't met that person yet.
Dude, I love learning knowledge gaps from him. Like it just totally changed the way that I thought of like how you really help someone have an epiphany, like getting them from a real problem to like problem where like, yeah, so cool. He's just shared that with me. Totally changed my life. And then just go check out Mo. I don't know, but that's kind of most of what I've had.
Do that too. I'm with you on that.
It's so fun. Raymond, if you come down here, I will take you on a tour skis of it for sure. We'll go hop in my Subaru, and we'll head right out there. It's a fun time.
Plan it for sure. I'll come out there next spring or summer for sure.
That'd be fun.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Yeah, let's just we'll just wrap it up now. Everything you said was really great. And what I want to share just super, super quickly, and I want your quick little thought process behind this, because some of you do know, some of you may not know, but Tyson is actually kind of the creator and author of our PDOCS motherboard, one of kind of the coolest tools that I and my students still use to this day. This thing is badass. But what I want to get was, what was your thought process on how to come up with this? If you can kind of keep it quick, because I know there was a lot that went into it. But just the overall thought process that helped you map this out, because what you really did here was you bridged all the gaps from any of our clients or students that came in the program and got stuck, didn't understand stuff, and you made it into like this step-by-step, paint-by-numbers, for lack of a better phrase, board, right? So I just love to hear your thought process behind how you built this.
So you remember the seasons thing, right? Like there's a season for obsession. Because I was like, hey, I haven't like figured out this thing, and if I'm going to take this seriously, I'm just going to know this. And I know Adam did his best at just filming those videos and going through the challenge, because to him, he's so natural at just like, oh, I've been doing this for years. I get this, right? Sometimes it's hard to translate like genius into like bite-sized pieces people can get along the way. And so I was like, well, that's a gap. So let me just go and fill it for PDOCS. I'm going to coach the guys. I'm going to add some value that way. So that's what I did. So I decided to go through those videos, and I'm sure, I can tell you, I had pictures of all your guys' stuff all across my wall.
I could just keep track of your wall covered. You sent me. Yeah.
Well, because I didn't want to get burned. I was like, I'm not a super sophisticated client, but I want you guys to know I'm serious. So here's a picture. Take me on. Like instead of being, well, he's too new, it'd be too much work to deal with, right? So I went through and like I just went through systematically of deciding, okay, well, here's how he wants his program to work. So here's all the elements that need to happen in this. And then I was like, well, I love Miro. It's great. Here's the features. Here's the things you're going to need. Because, when you have a course, it's on like a Kajabi or Teachable or something. And it's all just like, here's all the modules, and you can't really see what resources you're going to need right away. And when you're having a program, it's hard to be like, yeah, it's just like third module, second video, like that's just hard. But if you just slap this in front of them, you can say, boom, here's everything you need to do on your first 2 weeks. It shows you arrow by arrow, step by step, get this in place, and then you move onward all the way up through. So it was great because you guys gave me access to literally everything. And so it was fun for me just to say, oh, okay, I get to geek out on this and map this in someone's mind. So I don't know if there's like a necessary, like it was more of the effort and the obsession part and really good focus to finally say, look, what Adam's created here and what you guys have put together with your hybrid closer, it all fits together. It would be a waste not to find a way to like make this something that you can literally digest in a 20-minute sit down and just get the flow of, okay, here's the big picture of how this is going to look and how it's going to work for me in my business or in my ideas. And now I know that when I go into the weeds, I know where I'm at in the weeds. I'm not going to be lost. I'll be able to get back to the boat. I'll be able to, navigate myself. So that's why I created it. And that's a lot of screenshots, obviously, lots of you know to get it put together. But it was more so for myself just to know, okay, cool. When I'm teaching other people this, there's such good value. I don't want them to miss it because they're so stuck in the weeds,
No, but
So
you said it good. I mean, obsess and effort. This definitely took some effort and some attention to detail and some obsession. But what's so cool is like if I zoom out and you see how much stuff is in this whole board, right? It's pretty extensive. But if I just like go in and zoom on one particular aspect, like building out the eco thing, I mean, even just one of these yellow boxes is just kind of like so entailed with information. So there's just so much stuff in here that my actual paying students that get access to this is kind of like their Bible and their checklist, right? And anytime they have a gap, you could just go back to what you put over here on the left initially, right? Like, hey, I don't know what to focus on next. Well, go back to the initial checklist. Did you do step one? Did you do step two? And it's just very easy for people to be like, okay, I've done my knowledge gap, I've done my offer, I've optimized my buy. Oh shit, step five. That's why it's not working. I went on to step 6, 7, and 8. I skipped it. So like they can always go back and just realize exactly what they haven't done, fill that gap, or as we all know, some people try to do step 8 before doing step 3 and 4, right? And that's
we ran into that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would run into that a lot where they would kind of try to self-diagnose and then they would miss. It's tricky. He's like, oh yeah, I need help with this, and as entrepreneurs, they're already like, shiny object syndrome. So to put a program with a lot of shiny objects, it needed to be organized. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's
well,
kind of
like in anything you ever do. If you try to do step 7 without doing 3 and 4, how much luck are you going to have? You know what I mean? When
and it's terribly frustrating.
Anything. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Sometimes it's just terribly frustrating because you didn't even know there was a 1, 2, or 3 because it's just like our minds, we just watch a video of something, we're just like so floored by like the one piece of information stood out to us that we missed the 2 and 3 steps that made that one piece of information even work in the first place. So now it was a way just to like say, look, this like PDOCS is like so cool, but like you almost have to like don't let the coolness of it distract you from like what has to happen in order to get it to work. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, this was a blast. I always love jamming with you. I'm certainly think you provided some value to anybody watching now. I usually get more viewers on the replay, but I don't know. I don't have Facebook open while I'm doing this. I'm sure we probably have some live viewers as well. But yeah, I think this is super helpful. And my biggest takeaway for anyone watching to mimic Tyson's recommendations here and what he was talking about, kind of reverse engineering success and being obsessive about it, is literally it does take effort, it takes time, it takes hours, it takes all night. And if you're not willing to do that, just don't consider yourself an entrepreneur that wants to be successful. I mean, I hate to put it that bluntly, but there's no way around. Like I've worked with a lot of people now in the last 3 years, and the biggest difference between those who get results and succeed and those who don't are literally just the people that follow the instructions and do the work. I mean, and so many people just don't do it, and then they wonder, right? Why have I never made $1 million in sales or this or that? Why have you never, why have you never run your first ad? Why do you not show up to our group sessions? Why do you not? Like, it all comes back to really just sitting down and doing and being self-accountable for the effort you put in. I put in part-time hours, and I half-assed it. Well, you're going to see part-time results and half-assed results.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. There's a season, so just get through the season. Just do the hard work.
Touche. Because then you're going to be in the warmer, brighter season that pays dividends in the back end.
100%.
Awesome.